Welcome to the 902 Podcast, the official podcast of the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm Captain John Vick, and I want to thank you for listening. This podcast will give you an inside look at LSO with topics and guests to discuss public safety issues impacting Lancaster County. Be sure to subscribe for highlights on news, cases, and the people working for you at LSO. You can also follow us across social media at LSO Nebraska on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Welcome to the 902 Podcast. We are in studio today to talk about automatic license plate readers. As usual, Sheriff Wagner, Chief Deputy Houchin, thanks for being here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And we have a return guest to the show, Sergeant Jason Mayo.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
So Jason heads up our criminal interdiction unit, spends a lot of time up on the interstate, but really a lot of other places around the country. I mean, the crimes that you guys interdict here end up having, like we talked in a previous segment, an impact all the way across the country. I mean, you guys just recently got back from West Coast.
Yeah, California for a week or so.
Yeah, so just a lot of things that are passing through Lancaster County Sheriff on Interstate 80. And, things that we like to, go about our normal day and go to work, drop our kids off at school, and pretend that they don't happen here. But in reality, some of those things are coming right through Lancaster County every
some
day.
of them are destined for Nebraska and Lancaster County. Some of the narcotics and other criminal activity is destined for our location. So
Yeah.
the work that the interdiction unit does is it has a really significant local impact, but it has a really significant national impact, both the source of the contraband or crime and the proceeds of that crime. So it's really a worthwhile unit.
So that unit has a number of tools at their disposal. You guys use canines. You've got some X-ray equipment for vehicles if you're needing to check stuff. But another tool that you guys have used for a number of years now are license plate readers. Yes. And so I think there's probably a lot of people that are listening to this show, and maybe they have an idea of what license plate readers are in their mind, but I know there's a lot of misconceptions and maybe some just bad information out there. What is a license plate reader, and what does it do?
So currently, what we have now, and what we have had since 2017.
Yeah, February.
Are plate readers that are called, they're mobile units.
Yep.
But same camera, same everything. And what that does is, as vehicles roll by, it's running video, and it captures, it's trained to capture on the plate
Okay.
of a vehicle. So when it does that and it comes by, you'll be able to see a picture of the license plate, and wherever that's mounted, whether that's the front bumper or the rear trunk or bumper of a vehicle, you get a small picture of that specific plate that will upload into the system. And then that's what you have is a picture of a plate of a vehicle that's time and date stamped wherever it's at. So what is the benefit of having that information? What can we do with that image of that plate? Well, the main benefit is that the system is tied directly with like our NCIC program, which is, it would, for people who don't know, would house like a stolen autos, Amber Alerts, missing endangered people, wanted vehicles for whatever purpose that are internationally. It could be from a local source, but it's in a national database. So when those cars come by that are that crimes tied specifically to that plate, that will alert us and let us take some action as we're out there with it, right? As opposed to seeing it later or someone telling you that it passed by. You're actually right there and able to do something with that information.
People are going to wonder, when that pops up, are you getting registration information? Do you know who rents or owns the car and where they live and all that? Or do you have to do some follow-up work, especially on hits? You don't just make a traffic stop because there's a hit on the license plate readers, do you?
No. So how it works is we have a lot of, the technology we have is great, and we've had it for years, whether that's a local, Nebraska has one called NCGIS and then NCIC, but ways to check the registration of, say, a license plate. None of that comes up. All we have is a picture of a plate number in the system, right? So in order to verify that a vehicle's stolen, verify that it's the correct vehicle, the correct state, you have to go outside of that system completely to another controlled system, which is the NCIC or NCGIS or something like that, to verify that, one, the plate, you have to look at it, be sure the plate's correct with the state, because oftentimes, say, Oregon, for example, has the same numbering and lettering as Nebraska. So is Georgia, 3 and 3, 3 letters, 3 numbers. So you might get a plate that'll come up, and it'll say, oh, it's stolen, and you look at it, and it says stolen out of the initials of Oregon. It's like OR. So you have to look, oh, is this an Oregon tag? Yes or no, right? So you'll get a lot of those where it's correct, it's a stolen plate number, but it's the wrong state. So those are things you have to independently verify. And even if it does come by and say stolen, then you go through NCIC, check, be sure it's still reported stolen. And then we reach out to the agency to be sure, hey, is this active in NCIC? When was it entered? So there's things you have to do. It doesn't give you a probable cause to stop a car, reasonable suspicion to stop a car just based off that.
It provides there's good checks and balances in place.
Right.
So that innocent vehicles or innocent people aren't randomly being stopped.
So there's a camera sitting on your car.
Correct.
That looks at license plates.
Yeah, so they're just aimed. They're at a set location on our vehicles. They don't, it's not like a robot where you can move them around. They're at a set location, tightened down so they don't move. Obviously, the road's rough. There's the median's rough. There's big bumps in the road, especially this time of year with the potholes. But so that camera's at a specific place, mounted in a position where it's going to get the most reads off license plates, because otherwise nothing is saved other than, like, say it's running a video feed 24/7. The only thing that's saved on that is each license plate. Like, everything else is just gone, right? So it's not like you can go back and look. I want to see at the video. There's no such thing. All it is the pictures that are taken.
And so then it takes the license plate numbers that it sees, and it compares those against an existing law enforcement database.
Correct.
So how is that any different than if you were just sitting on the side of the road and looked at a license plate and then typed it into the law enforcement database?
It's exactly the same thing.
So really, the way I look at it is we're just leveraging technology to do what is already done by deputies,
right?
But on a higher volume basis, because the technology can do it more efficiently than what you and your deputies can do.
Right, and the advantage, it does it multiple times when you're up there, as opposed to, say, a car goes by you and you don't read the plate because you're not used to reading an Indiana plate with 6 letters and 3 or 6 numbers and three letters on it, and you can see that picture, and then you can check to see, as opposed to maybe you have to get out in traffic and follow it for 5 miles to get the plate number again, to be like, oh, is this what I read with my eyes as it went by? Yeah. You have that photo right there, and you're not buzzing all over the place to try to catch up to it.
Yeah. Well, and we'll get to this later too, but I know one of the allegations or the criticisms of LPR technology is that it would increase policing, and that that can have a different effect on certain demographics of the population. And I guess when I look at it that way, rather than having a deputy sitting on the side of the road and whether intentionally or not, we talk about implicit bias and things like that. If you're looking at a car, you have to use your eyes and say, I want to look at that car's license plate, write it down, run it through the database, and see if there's an issue with it. Versus, we take the human element out of it, and we're looking at all of the license plates that are coming by us and comparing those against that database.
Correct.
So it's almost an argument against that implicit bias that we could be interjecting unknowingly into which license plates we're running.
Correct.
Yeah. We've had these for a number of years here, but this technology was not new.
No.
When did this stuff start?
Well, it started in Britain in 1976, and it started being utilized, I believe, in the early 1980s in Great Britain. It really took off in the United States and became affordable in the 2000s, and the coast, East and West Coast, really jumped on it, and a lot of law enforcement agencies started to utilize them at that point in time.
And so they're using it again for stolen license plates or stolen vehicles. You can identify those. Amber alerts because with an Amber Alert, there's a vehicle that is typically, involved in that. I saw a statistic on just crime in general, and it was saying that more than 70% of crimes in the U.S. involve a vehicle. And, when you look at just that percentage of it, whether that's someone driving to a crime, leaving a crime, kidnapping, homicide,
sex trafficking,
theft.
Yep.
If 70% of those crimes are using a vehicle, that's a pretty important piece of the puzzle that we're trying to put together as law enforcement.
Yep.
So yes, several other agencies have been using this stuff for years. We're probably late to the game, if anything.
The Midwest there is a dark hole there with license plate readers because, like I said, on the coasts, they're all over the place.
Yeah.
I'd say the southern border, historically, the southern border and West Coast, East Coast, South. I mean, they've been around and still used very, very often, and they have amazing success stories off of those with very, very, very serious crime.
Right.
In states with toll roads, they use those things all the time to monitor the vehicles that go by to see if they're have a pass or not. And I know I've received tickets in the mail from the toll road around the airport in Denver.
Sure.
Because they don't give you, there's nowhere to stop, and they just mail you the fine for the toll. So
not a fine, but the toll for using the road.
And to be clear, like here, like our purpose in this, we're not so the Nebraska law would parking services from different cities or metropolitan areas are exempt from the license plate reader bill and how it's enacted. These are not being used for any kind of traffic enforcement.
Right.
They're not being used. They're not speed cameras. There's no speedometer in these cameras. There's no. We're not going to mail you a fine,
right?
Because we see something that's not what we do. City of Lincoln, I believe, or the company that they utilize for their services has that
For parking,
and those would be the people that would mail you a ticket, or they use it to see if your car's got outstanding tickets, and you get towed. But that's not what these are used for.
That is a good point, though.
So, and we need to say, why are we talking about this so strongly right now? Is because we have got permission from the state to put up 6 cameras on the interstate. And so that's kind of, instead of just having them on the cruisers, and when Sergeant Mayo's team's up there and they're being used there, but when they're off duty, they're not being utilized. They're sitting there and not being put to work, and these will, and that's the reason why we mainly coming on here and talking about this, because it's kind of hit into the public's eye, and we had some misconceptions on things.
We had to get several different layers of approval from the county board to enter into a contract with the company that provides these, and an agreement with the state to mount these on a permanent basis on the interstate. So there were a number of different public forums where this was discussed, and people were able to voice their opinions of it.
And we'll talk about specifically where we're looking at putting these coming up here, but getting back to Jason's point on some other uses of this, and Sheriff and Chief, I know we were talking, we're looking at using this for a law enforcement purpose, but whether people in Lincoln realize it or not, there's been license plate readers in Lincoln and Lancaster County for quite some time.
Oh yeah, car washes use them. So if you're a member of their club, it reads your license plate and says, "Yep, that's a member," and they process you through. Parking garages in some businesses have license plate readers to identify some of the demographics of their clientele, and should they get robbed, they've got a good record of vehicles entering and leaving that facility. So it's in private industry a lot.
Yeah, like some of the retail have the plate readers to let them know that, hey, this individual in this car have come and done shoplifting before, and it gives them a heads up that here they come again.
And those places don't have access to law enforcement databases like we do. So they're getting information basically probably from their own thing. So they're building a list of a car that they know has been involved in this before, or like you said, a member on a car wash thing.
I would imagine I'm just sort of guessing, but just like we have national databases for stolen cars, wanted people, missing persons, that the retail industry, that private industry, they have created their own databases of regular shoplifters, different clientele that they want to target, that sort of thing. So, yeah, it's just using a different set of database than we would.
And so just like those businesses have them in fixed locations at car washes
Right.
and parking garages, that's what we're looking to do, is rather than having them on the mobile unit on your cruiser, Jason.
Correct.
We're looking at some fixed locations in the state that we can actually mount those next to the interstate. So where are we looking at putting these?
Well, we're trying to focus on us, obviously, because Lancaster County is our area of responsibility. But we would like to have coverage between Omaha and Lincoln, and cars leaving and going that way, and also cars coming back in. That's usually the two biggest population bases in the state, and a lot of our crime in the county and in the city seems to kind of float back and forth between those two places. And we feel the highest traffic volume that directly affects us is coming through Interstate 80 on a daily basis as well. So it's a huge feeder for bad things that happen and could happen in our area.
So essentially east of us on Interstate 80 and west of us.
Correct.
On Interstate 80, and they'd be in fixed locations. But again, these cameras, these automated license plate readers, would essentially be doing the same thing that if we decided that it was important enough to pay a deputy to stand in a spot or sit in a car for 24 hours a day, these cameras are doing the same thing that deputy could be doing
Much quicker, much more efficiently.
more efficiently and cheaper for the taxpayer.
Yep.
And some people are talking about its invasion of privacy, but the United States Supreme Court has ruled on that it is not a Fourth Amendment violation to have your plates read. You don't have a right to privacy on a public roadway.
And I think a lot of that comes probably from the misconception of what these cameras do and what they don't do. And you started talking about that a little bit ago, Jason. But so just to clear up, do these cameras for us do facial recognition? No. Okay. So if I'm driving down the road with my family, one of these cameras sees my license plate, it's going to snap a picture of the license plate, but it's not going to be able to tell who is in the car.
Right, that's what you're getting. I mean, it depends on obviously where your car's at with where it's read, but the likelihood that the picture is of the back 1/4 of your vehicle and primarily the trunk and tailgate, that's probably the most that you're going to get. You rarely find a read that you can actually even look through any kind of windshield. That's just not how they take pictures.
Let's just say that by some circumstance, it caught the driver's face.
Right.
Are we comparing that to any sort of facial recognition database?
No.
So even in the unlikely event that someone's face, ended up in one of these license plate images, it's still not being run against any sort of AI, database or being sent somewhere.
Correct.
Okay. So what about, we talked about the personal identifying information, the names, addresses, things like that. So this directly it's not interfacing with, you're not getting that information popping up to you as far as checking a registration.
Right.
With someone's name and address when they see the license plate.
And that's kind of a big misnomer, is a lot of people say, there's so much, it's invasion of privacy. They're going to know who this is and where they're going. They're going to follow you from church and do this and that. If someone's really, really wanted this and they're the best super hacker in the world that breaks into the same housing that the national database is stored in license plates with the FBI. It's the same place. It's where they house this data.
Mm-hmm.
What they're going to get is a big disappointment, because they're going to see a picture of a plate. Right. And they don't know who that person is, and they don't know where that person lives without
having access to the other
hacking
database.
into a different database. And so there's no way to, they say, they're tracking where they're going. It's not. This license plate was at that location at this time.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it tells them. It doesn't tell you. You don't know who's in it. You don't know where it's going. You don't know if they're going to turn right, turn left. You don't know any of that. It's not like a drone that follows you, across a whole trip. It's
Right.
one photograph of a license plate at one point in time at this specific location.
What about immigration status? I mean, there's a lot of talk about immigration now and undocumented immigrants coming into the United States. Can we use this to figure out who's a citizen and who's not?
No, I mean, there's nothing to be tied to that unless someone's like a wanted fugitive.
Sure.
And they're tied to that plate.
That's already on some sort of database.
On a wanted list for like a felony warrant.
Okay.
That would be it.
And you touched on the traffic enforcement thing already, but I saw already some comments in the media and some social media stuff that I think people were concerned that they were going to get maybe a speeding ticket or get a ticket if their license plate was expired. Anything that we're going to be doing with that?
No, I mean, we have no way to track that.
Yeah.
And these aren't set up to.
It's not a speed camera.
Correct.
It's not a red light camera.
If it slows people down, we could say it is, but
Sure.
It's doing nothing of the sort.
We'll take traffic safety anytime, but that's certainly secondary, and it's not going to automated. It's not an automated process like you said with the toll road sheriff to send someone a citation in the mail.
Right. If you want a challenging career, a career where you can make a difference in your life, your family's life, and the lives of those in your community, come and join the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office. To learn more or to apply, visit us online at www.joinlso.com.
What about the data itself? How often is that deleted? The photos of these license plates.
So ours is set up pursuant to the state statute, and so the state, when they signed the bill a couple years ago, they wanted a 180-day retention period. So every 6 months, the data is automatically purged from the system. So the only way anyone's data is saved after that 180 days is if that car is entered for an ongoing investigation.
Okay.
Right, for some criminal behavior that's already ongoing with a case number and assigned to the specific investigator that says, hey, this data is important to us and we want to keep it.
So if somebody is in a criminal enterprise and using that vehicle a lot, that's when a time you would enter that license plate into the system and help you with your investigation. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and that's when it just would not be deleted. There's a lot of back and forth about the retention period because of the one side will say, well, privacy concerns, this shouldn't be just stored forever. The only issue we have with that is a lot of times crimes are belated.
Sure.
And so if you have too short of a retention time, you might not realize that someone is a suspect in a crime until a body's found.
Yeah.
Maybe that body's found 6 months later, 8 months later. Well, if it's 8 months later, we got nothing for you because of how the bill's set up now. If it falls within that 6 month time frame, you'll get some up to that date. So it's really for law enforcement investigative purposes. The longer that retention period is, the better, just because of the belated behavior, the belated nature of a lot of these cases that we deal with.
Well, let's talk about the case down in Texas where the son murdered his mother and was driving up, and I believe trying to go to Canada or North Dakota, South Dakota, one of those places, and he had her body in the trunk.
Right.
Now, it went by one of you guys up there, correct?
Yes.
But go ahead and explain what transpired and why retention is so important on this.
Well, in that case, as maybe last year, but an agency from Texas where the crime occurred, they were aware that the son had left. They suspected that maybe he was involved in the disappearance of his mom. So they privately, as an agency, entered that as what they can enter as a hot plate. Say, hey, we're interested in this car. We want to know if it goes somewhere because of this active investigation. But they didn't have enough to enter it as a wanted plate through the national system. But they came through here and they saw that it hit our plate readers because we share data with certain law enforcement agencies that sign a MOU. But anyway, they saw that it hit our plate reader and they called our office, said, hey, where are you guys at? We saw this hit a vehicle there and it's going, which way was it going, et cetera, et cetera. So we were able to basically tell them, hey, that went by us 45 minutes ago. It was headed westbound on Interstate 80. So we called ahead of the State Patrol, and that's when they got in a pursuit with the son, and eventually wrecked and found his deceased mother in the trunk of the car.
What are some other case examples that that we've had success with this technology here in Lancaster County?
Previously to that, we had almost the exact same scenario where it was not quite enough for an Amber Alert, but an agency in Illinois had one entered, and it was on a missing endangered child that they believed was being sexually abused, and they called us, same thing, that this went by you. Where would it be at now? Called the head of the State Patrol, stopped that guy, or actually contacted them in the rest area in York about an hour later, where she was being raped in the bathroom. But they caught him in the act of doing that. She was a 15-year-old runaway who he'd kind of taken. But they caught her, or caught him because of that. I would go ahead, Ben.
Oh, well, we had gold bars, silver bars, and all a bunch of money stolen from a residence here in the Roca Hickman area. A boyfriend was living with his girlfriend and her parents, and he still stole about $100,000 worth of property from them and took off. And we ended up being able to figure out he was in Florida off a license plate reader, and also ended up, he took off, bought a different vehicle with the proceeds he stole, went to South Carolina, and figured out the plate that was on his vehicle, got the hit, and they made their arrest on it. And we would have never known that information without the license plate readers.
Yeah, and I'm looking at another case example, and this was from a few years ago in California, but there was a carjacking. A gal was taking some trash to a dumpster, and a few people approached her and ended up confronting her with some firearms, stole her vehicle, locked her in the trash area. I think it's kind of one of those, fenced in areas like our recycling centers here in Lincoln. And then an hour later, there was a report of a neighboring jurisdiction, similar carjacking. And so they had the license plate numbers of the vehicles, obviously, because they were stolen. They're entered into NCIC just the same as we would with or without license plate readers. But then the next day, there was a hit on that stolen vehicle, and they were able to take the suspect into custody. They found the weapons that were involved. They located some of the other evidence from the crimes, and they ended up getting a full confession and identified a second suspect out of that. So, it's just a matter of, one thing can lead to another and lead to another, and this is just another piece in the puzzle that can help us put some of these things together. Another one that comes to mind to me, not locally, but it's certainly one that'll resonate with people, the murders of the college students in Moscow, Idaho. Yep. And I know that the license plate reader data was a part of the arrest warrant that was issued for the suspect in that case. And that was something, again, a piece, not the only thing, but it was a piece of the evidence that investigators were using to try and put that back together. So I guess, for me, when I look at it, is we are late to the game on this.
Yeah. Well, the Boston Marathon bombing, those suspects, they figured out where they were, and that was the initial.
They figured out the second suspect, second vehicle, because of that, and followed him around town and caught him.
Yeah, and that's when the shootout in
Watertown.
In Watertown occurred. Yep.
So I look at this as, our mission here is to keep Lancaster County a safe place to live, work, and play, and we are very invested in providing public safety to Lancaster County. And I guess with this being another tool in the toolbox, I just don't know why we wouldn't use it, because we want in law enforcement. We don't ever want to just send crime somewhere else. I mean, we want to stop crime wherever it happens, but our responsibility is here. And I just think that we all feel pretty strongly that if we're sitting across the table from some criminals, we're not going to let you perpetrate your crimes here. If you kidnap a child in Lancaster County, if you rob a bank in Lancaster County, if you commit some sort of crime in Lancaster County, we're not going to make it easier for you to get away with that here. We're going to bring every tool to the table at our disposal to make Lancaster County a safe place.
Well, that, and people, your normal everyday citizens, we are way too busy to worry about where you're going and what you're doing and all that. And if you're not committing crimes, we have absolutely no reason or care why you're going past our license plate reader. And it's, and there's so many checks and balances too on, when officers end up being able to use that. You have to have a case number in there. It marks who's doing that. You can't just randomly go in there and start looking for plates and how it went. Go ahead, Jason.
Well, and I was kind of going to go on top of that, but with what John was saying, I mean, if you flip yourself into the victim's shoes of whatever crime it is, and you say, hey, Lancaster County, what can you do to find my kidnapped child? Or
Yes.
whatever it is. Or I was held up at gunpoint at my house.
Yep.
You say, well, do you have is this technology out there? And we say, yeah. Well, can you get it? And we say, yeah. Well, what do you have it? Well, no. Why not?
Yeah.
So we have the ability, we have the funds that won't affect, through forfeited assets to make this work for the county.
Yep.
To make the citizens safer, and that's really what it's all about. And to jump back into what Ben was saying quickly about the checks and balances, but it's the system doesn't work. So if, say, Ben wants to look at a plate, right? There's not just a thing that he pulls up and just starts scrolling through plates. Does not exist. He can't look at it.
Yep.
It's got to be specific.
Yeah.
So it's not as easy to locate stuff.
Or misuse it.
Right. The misuse is extremely difficult, like all the systems we have. We've had them for years.
Yep.
And they're all very safeguarded and protected, and this is exactly the same thing.
And I know that all four of us in this room, we realize that this is a balance between there's liberty, right? And then there's safety. And there's kind of that balance in between the two. And I think all of us recognize that.
Absolutely.
And
that's why we have our Constitution.
It is. And so I think there's a way to take anything too far. But, I mean, Sheriff, would you say that has been weighed into the decision-making?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the laws that we have in Nebraska where the language was submitted by the ACLU before anybody was employing LPRs anywhere in the state, we had a law that prescribed how they should be used. And I'm sure, it was based upon their constitutional parameters, and we follow those, and it's serving us well.
Well, let's maybe talk about that a little bit, Jason, because I know that there's been some concerns that have been raised about this by the ACLU and others. So what are some of those that you've heard?
I mean, we've talked on them on here. They feel like it's invasion of your privacy, that you're, what if there's a data breach, right? What are you going to get out of that? They feel like it might affect people of color more than others, maybe more policing. I think there's going to be more enforcement. And like I said, the reality is it's not an enforcement tool for us. It's one tool in the toolbox to hopefully help us stop major violent crime, high-profile crimes, and be a stopping point for that crime as they're traveling across the country, as opposed to a pass-through point where they continue to commit crimes. So,
and I would say, to that point, there are members of minority communities here in Lancaster County that are victims too. And I don't think that we should turn our back on those groups of people, just out of fear that there may be, an effect on the amount or increase or decrease in policing. Because like we talked about earlier, if anything, and we go through implicit bias training every year. You and I were just sitting in the training a couple days ago, and one of the professor's recommendations. This is a guy that studies this; it's his life's work. And they said, "Well, what can we do to combat implicit bias?" And he said, "Well, do what you can to eliminate the human, piece where you can." Well, that's exactly what this is doing. Instead of asking a deputy or an officer to sit on the side of the road and run license plates
and make a judgment on which cars to run.
Yes, we're leveraging technology to be more efficient and take that human element out, so that we're not being overly selective on which plates are being run. So,
and why do you want to protect the criminals?
Yeah,
I don't understand their logic on that.
Well, we're certainly interested in protecting people's rights, and doing things the right way. That's why we have a policy. That's why we follow the statute. But that's I think the piece that we don't want to get lost on the listeners, is that we have victims in all of those communities too, and we take that responsibility to them very seriously to investigate crimes, no matter who you are, where you came from.
Yeah, if your child was kidnapped, wouldn't you want us to do everything possible to locate them as fast as we could?
Right.
And why would you take away a tool that has been proven to be able to assist in making those arrests?
Any other ones that we didn't hit on, Jason, as far as some frequently asked questions or some concerns?
They've talked about like third party, who holds the data, right? Who's in charge of it. We are.
Okay.
Every plate that gets through our system, it's run by our cameras, is owned by Lancaster County. Nobody can touch that. It's housed at the same place that they house the NCIC license plate, the big national database that the FBI is in charge of. Same system.
Okay.
The only people that can access our data are other law enforcement agencies who have a signed MOU with us, and based off them signing that MOU, the data goes away just like it does with us. If they want to check a plate and it comes up here, it's only going to come up within 180 days.
Okay.
They have to enter a reason for running that. They have to enter a case number and a reason for checking that plate that came up in our state, right? So the same, it's set up.
They're following our state law.
Everything is in line with Nebraska state law.
Okay.
With any law enforcement, and that's the only other people that have access to our data if we have a signed MOU with them. Right?
But again, that data is not faces. It's not names. It's not addresses. It's license plates.
Yep.
Okay. Others.
The other thing I kind of mentioned is it's like you guys had talked earlier. It's an older technology that keeps getting better and better, right? So I can tell you there's a huge difference in the cameras I had in 2017 to the cameras I have now. They take way better photographs. They get a lot more of the car. So instead of getting 50%, you might get 90, right? So the technology is getting better, which is good for what you're putting into it. And then I think the public perception is changing a lot. It has, in that it used to be this big thing. Oh, why would we do that? And then something terrible happens somewhere, and then they catch them because of license plates, the plate readers. Tennessee was one of the last states that passed a bill to support that in the state, and they had total bipartisan support with zero no votes, and it was all Democratic senators that proposed the bill, right? So that tells me that the politics aisle, everyone kind of has got to a point to think, yeah, maybe this is a pretty good thing.
Yeah.
Maybe our safety is important. You're still going to have some of the outliers with the ACLU, and they're going to say, well, hey, we still have our reservations about that. But I really feel like the public perception is correct with law enforcement's intent and what's able to be done with these things. And the bottom line is it's going to make the community safer and make law enforcement more successful at solving crime quickly.
Other thoughts?
This has been a huge process for us to get through it. Jason and I and Captain Pashang have been working really hard for the last 3 or 4 years on trying to get this up, because we do believe wholeheartedly that it is going to help the citizens on this. And Jason's been beating the drum on this for a long time, and I'm really happy that he continued and did not give up, and that it's going to come to fruition. And I really just appreciate all the work he's done.
Yeah, I mean, and even just to add on to that, we didn't talk much about it. There's several other agencies in Nebraska that have the same thing we have right now with some mobile readers, and they're doing a great job with them. And they're trying to expand to state agencies and some other people that have agreed and got permission, and they're also going to be involved in the line to hopefully help the citizens of not just Lancaster County, but the entire state of Nebraska to be safer. So it's just encouraging from a standpoint of when we did try to solve crime when we had nothing like this available to knowing what it can do for us now. And it's pretty amazing.
And I know people like, and I've been asked, are you going to expand in this technology? And I guess the answer right now is, one, it's pretty expensive to do that.
Yep.
But two, we're going to take a good look at how successful this is. I believe it will be. And if we are getting real positive things from this, we will be looking at placing them at different locations and doing that. So, but we're not going to just go starting right now. We're going to evaluate and go from there. And we're not going to take them off the cars, because we're going to continue to do that, because there's other times where there can be a homicide in an apartment complex, and instead of having an investigator try to walk by and write every license plate down that's in the parking lot, you can drive through there with one of these cars, get all that information in the plates, and then if something pops up, you have it. So there's just lots of different ways that this can assist.
Yep. Well, I just appreciate everybody's time today and going through this issue. I think, you know, we've picked on a few concerns that are out there, but I think there are some well-intentioned people that just have questions about this, and it may be from a lack of understanding. It may be just not having, you know, a realistic picture of what this technology is and what it isn't. But I hope that this has answered some of those questions and been able to fill in that information gap for people that do still have them. I think for me, you know, if there is that person out there that has that question, a law-abiding citizen, about whether or not this is going to be taken, you know, an impact towards their privacy, I guess I would look at your example, you know, Jason, of what's the expectation of our citizens here, and I don't want to have that conversation with them when they are the victim of a crime. That technology exists, but that for whatever reason we haven't taken the step to use it. So,
or we chose not to.
Yeah. And I think that's it's important that we use all the tools at our disposal to fight crime.
Last thing I'd add, I know that the legislature looked at amending some of the plate reader statute a little bit to make it work a little bit better, clear some things up, so it's a little easier to comprehend.
It's not the easiest bill to read and understand.
Mm-hmm. Right, and so they went to do that, and I'm super appreciative of those efforts, and they've met with us and talked with us, and I would just reiterate that at the end of that, we are trusted in our profession with a lot of people's things that do affect their privacy.
Yes.
Right. And we have a lot of access with programs that do. We can dig on some people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of our investigative nature of our work. But the plate readers themselves, the things that we could glean from that, or the information that we get from that is comparatively very minute.
Yeah.
As far as a privacy concern or someone's personal identifying information or things that you could glean from that. And so they had attached something on the end of that bill to make it they wanted to make it a Class 4 felony for any misuse of the system. Mm-hmm. And comparatively to what we deal with, which would already have parameters set up in state statute for...
Yeah, there's already penalties for misusing those databases where there is that personal identifying information.
Right, and so it was just a knee-jerk reaction, I think, from some other agencies that decided that, well, what if we did this? Would you take that? And I think that's kind of
And the frustrating thing is...
It's a scare tactic.
Yeah, and those agencies weren't even running license plate readers that were making some of the comments.
So I just don't think they maybe understood what they could really do with it. So
right.
I'm not advocating for, well, hey, you need to do whatever you need to do with this. There should be oversight, and that's what there is with our office. That's what there is with all of law enforcement, and that's how the system's set up to have oversight. And we already have penalties established for any law enforcement or civilian who misuses that data, that info, and criminal penalties for that. And I don't think there needs to be additional things on top because this one, is different.
Yeah,
it's just a little weird.
I hope that this episode has helped answer a lot of those questions and bridge that information gap a little bit. We're not going to be able to talk about everything that comes to license plate readers in 45 minutes, but hopefully we've addressed at least some of the questions that are out there in the community, and we'll continue to do that as we go forward. So thanks, guys.
Thank John for coming up with this idea. I think we've been in the news several different times of late just because of those, and I think doing this and just being able to talk about it, and we're totally 100% transparent. If people have any questions, by gosh, please send them to us, and we'd be more than happy to answer.
And our policy's on our website.
It is.
Our license plate reader policy's on our website, lancaster.ne.gov/sheriff, and you can go there and read it for yourself. So, cool. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode of the 902 podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening to this discussion of automatic license plate readers and the technology and how we intend to deploy it within Lancaster County in the coming months. If you have any additional questions about what you heard on this episode or future topics, be sure to send us an email, lso@lancaster.ne.gov. You can also find more episodes of the 902 podcast on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts. And be sure to connect with us on social media at LSO Nebraska across Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, and TikTok. Thanks for listening.